everyone, it's Annette Green with Graphic 45. One of my favorite things to do with Graphic 45 paper and their staple items is to alter the boxes that they carry. And one of my go-to techniques in the last couple of years has been to add a base to the boxes to accommodate the Graphic 45 claw feet like I've done here. So today's video is going to share how to make a base like this for any size box that you wish, not just Graphic 45 boxes, but any. And you won't believe how easy it is. So you might be asking, like, well, why add a base at all? And sometimes you don't have to. So in this example here, I've just used a paper mache purse kind of thing that I bought at the craft store and duded it all up, and then I actually just adhered the feet right to the bottom. After I painted them red, as you can see, and gilded them with gold. There's a whole video on this one, and I'll add that link so you can go there. But, you know, it's just a box, and so it doesn't need a base. It can work just like this. Here's another instance of that. The base is solid and square and nothing needs to open, so I just adhered the feet right to the bottom. This is a Graphic 45 black shadow box. But sometimes you have an instance like this. So this is the 5x5 Graphic 45 black mixed media box, and I wanted to, instead of using it this way, I wanted to turn it on its side and do it vertically like this. Well, if you look at the box, you can't really glue the feet right on there because then you've glued the lid shut. So you have to have something added to the bottom. I'll show you some other examples. This one was one I did with Enchanted Forest, and it opens from the side just like that one I just showed you. And if you want to take a peek inside, that has a little mini album in there. This is the regular book box that I used last year to make a Sherlock Holmes inspired briefcase. So the box opens to the front like this. There's a mini album inside. I just recently did one with Little Women as well that looks more like a purse. So I had a masculine and a feminine version. But here again, I had to add a base to the box because, like I said, if you put the feet right on the box, you can't get the lid open anymore. Now, sometimes I do it just for decorative purposes. You know, just to add a little more beef to the box. Like I could have actually just put the feet right on the box here. This is, again, the 5x5 mixed media box, and it opens the traditional way from the top. Has some cards in there. But I just thought, you know, just to give it a little more something, dress it up, I added a base to that one. Same here with my little Christmas card keeper. The book box this time is glued open, the back lid, and it's just a decorative base, just to add a little more heft and body and to put those pretty feet on there. And then last is this vintage Hollywood tag and card station. It's like a desk station where I incorporated some boxes with cards and envelopes and some post-it pads and tags and a pen. But I added this whole base to the bottom, and it really, really dressed up the whole thing. It was a unit that everything could be glued to, and then the feet could be added at the end. And this looks really pretty on my desk. Okay, I should mention that the base of all my boxes is made of cardstock. I didn't say that before. I used to start off with wood bases, and I'd have to have my husband go get a big sheet of wood and cut it down for me, and then to ship that for classes it got to be very expensive. So I found an alternative way with just cardstock that you are not going to believe. So anyway, I'm going to demonstrate with this little ATC book box that I did with Penny's Paper Doll family paper. I made it just like this for a very simple class, but now I want to show you how to add a pretty base so you can put the feet on this one. Now I will mention that there is math involved. Don't leave. Don't be scared. It's okay. I'm going to show you a very, very easy thing to do, and I'm going to give you little quick reference things that you can go to so you don't get overwhelmed by the math. But the first thing that I do is I measure the bottom of the box, or whatever side of the box I want the base to be on. So I am going to add one to the bottom of this. And I like to keep a little notebook, and I write down what box it is and the measure of the box. So I don't have to do it every time I go to make one. I'll have it all here. And then I draw a little rectangle to represent the base of my box. It doesn't have to be totally accurate, just close. And so I know with the Graphic 45 claw feet that I need 3/4 of an inch of depth for those feet to work nicely. So knowing that, you take your measure of your base, and I'm just going to draw it on here. I'm going to fake like I'm drawing another 3/4 of an inch all the way around real quick. Okay, so that's 3/4, and that's 3/4, and so forth. So far so good, right? And we already know that this is 4 3/4 by 3 5/8. Nice and messy. Okay, so far so good. Then you draw another 3/4, and this will be explained in a bit, all the way around. And this is 3/4. Now you don't have to write it all out like this, but I do. It helps me. Okay, and then comes the actual math. Let's fast forward so that you understand why you're doing what you're doing. So this is basically the beginnings of what you want to build your base for your box. Okay, so this is why we figured the additional 2 areas of 3/4 inch, so that we eventually will build a little base like this. Now we are going to fill this in so it's really sturdy and it's not just an open box like that. But here's the idea of why you did what you did as far as doing the math for 2 3/4 inch sections on each side. As you see, we'll cut away the corners and stuff in a bit. Okay, now time for the math. Easy math. All right, so we know what our measure is for our base, and we know we have to add 3/4 to all those measures 2 times. So I just simplify it out here. I know that 3/4 is 0.75. You might not know that. So hey, guess what? I found this great website, inchcalculator.com. It'll tell you. It has a chart. So don't worry about converting back and forth to decimals and fractions, because it does it all for you in the great chart there. So anyway, I know that I am going 3/4, 3/4, 4 3/4, 3/4, 3/4. So that's exactly what I show here. And the end number that I get is 7 3/4, or 7.75. So do that, and then you do the same going down. 3/4, 3/4, your 3 5/8, which is 3.625, and 2 more 3/4 to get 6 5/8. So I always write that up here. Cut this size. Okay, and we know this is our piece that we cut, and we know that we have to do 2 scores of 3/4 all the way around. So I'm going to go 3/4 and another 3/4, which is at 1 1/2, and I'm going to rotate, and I'm going to do that all the way around. This is just heavyweight ivory cardstock. If you were doing a black box, I would use black. Sometimes it doesn't matter at all because I cover it with paper. Okay, so I mean, that's super easy. We've all done stuff like that, right? And then you will cut away the 4 corners completely. No tabs left, nothing. And then you'll fold on all those score lines all in the same direction. Okay, here's the magical support secret to put in your base to make it really solid. We're going to create these square tubes. They're cardstock as well, and they are going to line the whole inside of the box. And I'm going to do 4 for this particular size. So basically all I've done is scored a piece of cardstock. So I have 5 panels, because 4 would make a square, right? But you need that 5th one to actually adhere and make a solid square, or yeah, square tube, let's call it. Okay, so let me show you how I arrived at those measures. Okay, so to determine the dimensions of your tubes, you're going to measure your inside of your base Now we're not measuring from end to end. You're going to measure just that inside part because again, we're going to build tubes that lay inside like so. So all we need is that measure across from that inner fold to that inner fold. Now, you might just say, oh, well, we already know that that's 3 5/8, but you do want to go a 1/16 of an inch smaller than whatever your measure is here, because when you fold this up, it's actually created it a little bit narrower than the 3 5/8 original measure on the inside. If you measured here to here, it's 3 5/8, but if you measure from score to score here, it's 3 9/16, which is just 1/16 less than 3 5/8. Don't worry. So if you're not sure on a ruler, let me put something behind this. This is my basic quilter's ruler. It's just like any ruler. And this is how your trimmer is set up. You know, you've got your inches and your half inches and quarters, but people freak out when it starts to get smaller for some reason. So, you know, the teeniest, tiniest little tick on most rulers and trimmers is 1/16 of an inch. And then the next size up are 8ths. So if I said this needs to be 3 9/16, I would just measure 3 and then count 1, 2, 3, 4, 9 little tiny ticks on the ruler or on your trimmer. All right, so that's how we determine that measure. Now we need to know how wide does it need to be. So if you think about it, we know that the base can be no higher when it's built than 3/4 of an inch. So you don't want your tubes to be any higher than that. So you know that that's your determining measure, 3/4 of an inch. All right, and to create the tube, like I said before, you have to have 5 of these panels. So 5 times 3/4 of an inch is 3 3/4, right? So that means that you need to cut a piece of paper, the 3 9/16 by 3 3/4. Now, the 3 3/4 is pretty much always going to be the case with any size box that you make. This is the number that will be different each time you do a different box. It depends on that inside measure, like I said. So just know that. But this part's easy because it's just 5 panels at 3/4 of an inch. So the end result is a piece of paper cut at 3 3/4 by 3 9/16. And we'll put that into our little scoreboard here. And with the 3 3/4 in your scoreboard this way, you're just going to score 3/4 of an inch all the way across 4 times. So there's 3/4. Then the next one would be at 1 1/2 and 2 1/4 and then 3. Super easy. And then you just fold them all in the same direction, put some adhesive and glue it up. All right, so I've got my 4 tubes and I've got my base, and I'm gonna get some adhesive and I'm just gonna glue these in. The main thing that you need to know, zoom in a little bit, is when you do your very first one, don't start in the middle. Start here, kind of square up as you glue it in with that corner. Nice and square. Check it, make sure everything could wrap around right now. Nice and square. Don't let it shift, don't let it slant on you, don't push down because it's going to do that. And you'll be good to go. So I'm going to start with those 2 outer ones, and then I'm going to fill in, just sort of eyeball, evenly space those other 2, just like that. Okay, so I just want to show you so far how I've done. Like I said, that very first one I put in there. And what I like to do right away, like on this one, is go ahead and bring over and adhere that side flap. And make sure, this is where you want to make sure you're nice and square and you're not leaning. Okay, so it's a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to put some adhesive here and here, and I'm going to bring this on around as well. And then I'll glue in those other 2. Now that my 4 support beams are in there, that's how it's looking. Now this next step, before you go any further, I want you to go back to your measure of just this part of the box when this is all closed. So for us, remember it was the 4 3/4 by 3 5/8. So I cut a piece of cardstock, an additional one. You could do this with decorative paper or whatever you want. It's not really going to show, so it doesn't matter. But eventually this is gonna adhere here. Okay, so your next step is gonna be to glue these in. Now this is where liquid glue is your friend as opposed to score tape, because you can kind of slide around. Because if you see, you know, as you get to gluing and you push like that, that's not really squared up. You want to make sure that's square. And so if you already have glue on there, you can kind of slide that into place and square up that corner. So you want to do that all the way around, make sure this is nice and square. And I am going to make sure I get a little adhesive here where the paper is going to touch in those spots. So I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. All right, and then I glued my cardstock piece on there and added some decorative papers around all four sides, and the bottom is nice and clean. This is actually going to be the bottom. You could put paper on here too, because, you know, sometimes if you lift up your box and look at it, you might want to see something prettier than just that solid cardstock. So you could put decorative paper on the underside, but this side is going to get completely covered by the box, like so. Okay, so the last step before actually putting it on the box, because the box might be a little bulky with stuff on it, is to flip it face down and adhere all your feet with some metal glue. I like E6000, and just press and hold each one for about 60 seconds before you let go and move on to the next one. Keep it upside down and let it dry for a good hour before you handle it again. And then you can go ahead and use some strong glue to adhere these two together. So you can see the possibilities where you could actually make the base just a little bit bigger than the box. I added about 1/4 of an inch to all my measures after I measured the box on this one. So it kind of sticks out a little further. Has kind of a nice look as opposed to being flush with the measure of the box like this one. So, I mean, you saw how easy the math is. You can do it. Okay, a couple of last minute tips to add to the end here. Just be careful when you are gluing your papers on and doing all your work here on your base that you don't mash this down. I mean, it's pretty darn sturdy now that it's put together, but if you're not careful when you're gluing things down, you could see that those tubes want to kind of slant and mash a certain way. But once you get this all on, it is just as solid as can be. So just be careful. And the other thing is, if you're going to add a base to a box that you're turning vertical like this, with the square box, it's not as much of an issue. 3/4 of an inch high works just perfectly. You can see that the feet just touch right below the box there. If I were to do this again though, I think I would just make this 1 inch instead of 3/4, just so you have a little bit more room there. But it looks nice. Now, with the regular book box, though, you will have to make sure that you build your base 1 inch high because of this recess lip here. It's not a flush lid like the square box. It actually has an additional 1/4 inch overhang. So you absolutely have to have a 1 inch deep on this. So again, take your measures as your base, add 1 inch all the way around, and follow the same steps, and you've got it. Okay, and that is it. I hope you learned something new. I hope you'll give it a try. And if you have any questions, let me know. And don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button if you like what you saw, and have a great day. Thanks for joining me.